Good evening and welcome. This is the January 11th, 2023 public hearing of the Land Use Commission. The City Code directs this body to hear applications for map and text amendments, special uses including plan developments, zoning relief, and appeals from decisions of the zoning administrator, as well as to make recommendations regarding the city's long-term planning goals and objectives. Depending on the type of matter, this commission will either make a final determination or send its recommendation to City Council. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Arevalo?
Here.
Commissioner Halleck? Here. Commissioner Hugo? Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Linwall?
Here.
Commissioner Mordinchev? Commissioner Bechtel? Commissioner Westerberg?
Here.
And Chair Rogers.
Here. With 5 members present, we do have a quorum. Also present tonight from city staff are Neighborhood and Land Use Planner Megan Jones, Zoning Administrator Melissa Klotz, Planning Manager Liz Williams, and Assistant City Attorney Alex Ruggie. This is a formal hearing and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time, so all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the commission regarding any matter on the agenda tonight will have the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. Commissioners may ask questions at any time. Our procedure is to hear from the staff on the documents on file and then receive testimony and other evidence from the applicant or appellant. After that, persons wishing to make a statement regarding the matter will have a chance to do so. Any person with a legal interest in property located within the defined notification requirements of the subject property may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses, or seek a continuance of the hearing. When all supporting and opposing testimony and statements have been heard, the applicant or appellant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal or a closing statement. Then the commission will close the record and begin deliberations to consider the standards. The commission will make a formal finding of fact based on the testimony and evidence presented, guided by the standards, the commissioner's knowledge of the community, and the recommendations of staff. All testimony is taken under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony to the proposal as it relates to the standards contained in the zoning ordinance and corresponding staff memo. When testifying, please state your name and address for the record and sign in on the public comment sheet. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you're at a microphone when asking questions or making statements so that you may be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Any matter not concluded at tonight's hearing will be continued to our next regularly scheduled meeting. I just want to do a quick roll call of agenda items this evening. Is the applicant for 1555 Oak Avenue present? Thank you. The appellant for 1733 Oakton? Okay, thank you. 1801 through 1805 Church and 1708, 1710 Darrow? They're out in the gallery, I've heard. And 1811, 1815 Church, 1708. What is this? Are these the correct addresses? Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I was like, didn't read the addresses when I looked through it. 1708, 1710 Darrow is the same applicant as the other one. With that, I am going to make a motion to start us off before we get into anything. We do have the election of officers and committee members this evening, which is item number 3 on the agenda. I would like to move that to the end of the agenda so that we can actually do the business and not have people sit through our discussions on officers and meeting schedule. So that'd be item 3 and item 4 being moved until after all the new business, but before the communications. Is there a motion for that? Moved by Halleck, seconded by Lindwald. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
So that's what we will do. Although the first item we do have for approval tonight is the meeting minutes from November 30th, 2022. Have the commissioners had an opportunity to read through those, and are there any edits?
Yes, I have one on page 8 of 13. In the paragraph that starts, Mr. McKenna made a few final comments. Down toward the bottom, there's a sentence, and finally, when the fire department brought to the attention of connections that the basement should not be used as rooms, it says the activity increased, and I believe it should say the activity ceased. and future similar use of the basement is not contemplated.
Thank you. Commissioner Westerberg?
On page 2 of 13, and the paragraph that begins with Sue Laubach, Connections Manager of Advocacy, it mentions the status of the Good Neighbor Agreement. I think the paragraph should indicate that Ms. Laubach indicated the Good Neighbor Agreement was not going to be done until after the permit was granted. And the status of that agreement was considerably up in the air, which is why it kind of kept on the stove the issue of the negative impact on the community. So I do believe that should be added to that paragraph.
All right. Any other comments? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval of the minutes?
I move.
I'm sorry, we already have a standing motion. Do we have a standing? No, we don't have a motion yet, so. Mr.
I move to
Westerberg?
approve the minutes.
As amended or corrected?
Moved by Westerberg, second by Lindwall.
Sure.
Any further discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With the majority, 5 votes, the motion to approve the minutes with those edits has passed. We will move now into, because we've reordered our agenda, to move our personal business to the latter part. At this point, though, I want anybody who feels they may be speaking to us on any matter on tonight's agenda to be sworn, so I'll ask you to raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings? Thank you. With that, we will move into the agenda items. I will remind everyone we do have 4 items on the agenda, and some of them could be rather lengthy. So please keep comments on point and directed to the specific issues that this commission will hear, which are the land use commission, or the land use issues. So with that, I will ask the applicant to make his way to the microphone for the first case and ask that it be read into the record by Ms. Klotz.
1555 Oak Avenue, 22 ZMJV 0085. Camille Halim, property owner, requests a special use permit for an apartment hotel at 1555 Oak Avenue, commonly known as the Museum Residences on Oak or the King Home, in the R6 General Residential District, Section 6883. The Land Use Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, the determining body for this case, in accordance with Section 6358 and Ordinance 92021.
Thank you. If you would please state your name for the record.
Certainly. Honorable members of the commission, my name is Alan M. Diddish. I am the general counsel to BCH 1555 LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Dish. And if you would please tell us about your proposal.
Sure. By the way, with me this evening is William Ng of WNA Architects, Inc., in case you have any questions with respect to those matters. We are here this evening to request a special use permit to operate an apartment hotel at 1555 Oak Avenue in what is an R6 zoning district. The property comprises 1/2 of a city block and stretches from Oak Avenue on the west to Maple Avenue on the east and borders Grove Street on the south. A 6-story institutionally designed building currently sits on the property. The property was previously operated as an assisted living facility under the name of the King Home and was run by Presbyterian Homes. BCH 1555 LLC purchased the property in 2017, and the property has remained vacant ever since. BCH 1555 initially intended to operate an independent living facility, assisted living facility, and memory care center on the site. However, the pandemic made that use economically unfeasible, and we began to look for other potential uses. The building currently has 67 units. Those units each have living and sleeping areas, bathrooms, and kitchenettes. The kitchenettes are currently without stoves and ovens. If a special use permit is granted, we intend to add stoves and ovens to all the kitchenettes so that all the units will be deemed dwelling units within the meaning of the zoning code. The building also includes 2 fully equipped restaurants, 2 large meeting rooms, an exercise facility, a barber beauty shop, a library, a bar, and space for a sundry store. The property also includes substantially landscaped courtyard area and a more than sufficiently sized parking lot. Section 6-18-3 of the zoning code defines an apartment hotel as, quote, "a hotel with dwelling units in which all accommodations are provided in dwelling units and in which at least 25% of the guest rooms are for occupancy by transient guests," close quote. Thus, what we propose meets the code's definition of an apartment hotel. First, after the addition of the stoves and ovens to the kitchenettes, all the units will qualify as dwelling units under the code. Second, at least 25% of the guest rooms will be utilized as for transient guests. In fact, we are proposing that up to perhaps 100% of the units be utilized by transient guests. Thus, in sum, what we propose meets the code's definition of an apartment hotel. That said, we respectfully submit that our proposal then meets the 9 criteria set forth in Section 6-3-5-1 of the Code. Specifically, first, and as what we have shown, our proposed use of the property qualifies as an apartment hotel, and an apartment hotel is a special use in an R6 zoning district. Second, our proposal complies with the purposes of the comprehensive general plan as well as the zoning ordinance in general. The proposed apartment hotel is an adaptive reuse of a currently vacant property. The property already includes significant green space and more than sufficient parking, all in proximity to the downtown district. Third, the proposed apartment hotel will not cause a cumulative negative effect in combination with existing special uses. We note that the immediate vicinity already includes a variety of special uses, including, among others, restaurants, daycare centers, convenience stores, and so forth. Fourth, there is no reason to believe that the proposed apartment hotel will interfere with or diminish the value of other properties in the neighborhood. Indeed, utilization of a presently vacant building will improve neighborhood aesthetics, property values, and add tax revenues to the city's coffers. Fifth, current public facilities, utilities, services, and so forth are more than adequate to handle the proposed apartment hotel's anticipated needs. Sixth, the proposed apartment hotel will not cause undue traffic congestion. The building currently has a driveway for loading and unloading guests, and the parking lot accommodates a more than sufficient number of vehicles. Seventh, the building is of a 1950s institutional design and frankly has no architectural or aesthetic value whatsoever, thus there's nothing to preserve, and thus this factor is inapplicable to the analysis. Eighth, we intend to maintain the current landscaping in the courtyard area and will thus preserve those environmental resources already in place. And ninth, the proposed apartment hotel will comply with all other applicable ordinances, rules, and regulations. In conclusion, given our ability to meet the aforementioned criteria, we respectfully submit that we meet the requirements of Section 6-3-5-10 and respectfully request that this Honorable Commission recommend to the City Council that BCH 1555 LLC be granted a special use permit to operate an apartment hotel at 1555 Oak Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dish. Are there questions from staff, or I'm sorry, from commissioners? Commissioner Halleck?
Yeah, this is a question for staff, and I may have missed this in the the packet. The code says a minimum of 25% have to be transient. Is there a maximum?
The zoning definition does not include a
not.
maximum.
Okay.
Commissioner Westerberg?
If, however, it has 100% transient guests, doesn't that turn that into a hotel as opposed to an an apartment hotel? What's the dividing line there?
There is no extremely clear dividing line within the zoning ordinance. Staff did go back and forth with the applicant, noting that the definition of hotel may better fit the use, but also acknowledging that there is no maximum percentage listed within the apartment hotel definition. Therefore, we believed it was best to move forward with the special use and let the commission make that determination as it relates to standard number 1.
I'll put the question out there then. If something is over 50%, doesn't that automatically make it something different? We have accessory uses all the time. So if a restaurant exists in a hotel, as a hypothetical, that's a hotel that has a restaurant in it. It's not a restaurant that happens to have a hotel attached to it. The hotel is the primary use, because that is what the majority of the use of the building is that's being,
That is
Done.
correct.
okay. So I guess I'll ask Mr. Diddish the question then. Although there is no maximum listed, once we reach 50% plus 1, does that not change the definition of what this is? Because if you don't have apartments in an apartment hotel, how is it an apartment hotel? And I realize that adding kitchens in makes them dwelling units, but to me, that seems like a little bit of a runaround.
Yes, but what we are looking at is the strict definition provided in the ordinance itself without reading into it exceptions or what perhaps should have been written or trying to clarify something that seemingly may be unclear, because the definition states explicitly in which at least 25% of the guest rooms are for occupancy by transient guests. It doesn't say that at 51% that somehow suddenly this apartment hotel becomes a hotel.
But the definitions would not necessarily state that. That's the principle of land use itself. Primary use is primary use.
But it doesn't talk about the primary use here. What it says, again, what the definition is a hotel with dwelling units. We all agree on that part of it. In which at least 25%. It doesn't say in which less than 51% or 51% are for occupancy by transient guest. It explicitly states simply in which at least 25% of the guest rooms are for occupancy by transient guests. We respectfully submit that what we're proposing would meet that definition.
I'm not going to argue it with you, because you're going to make your stand, and I'm going to interpret the way I interpret it.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to belabor it for everybody here. But I mean, that's where I am struggling with this, is that if indeed, once you reach a primary use that is different, whether it's in the definition or not, the primary use is the primary use. Commissioner Lindwall, then Westerberg.
Okay. I've got questions about how the proposed restaurant, barber shop, massage spa, those kinds of accessory spaces are proposed to be used, and also then who's going to operate this facility?
Well, we would operate the facility itself. Originally, when it was going to be used as a retirement home, assisted living, and so forth, we had already redone the kitchens and so forth, and we had set up the beauty shops and so forth. We had people all planned and lined up to work those various positions. Obviously, it's something we would have to go at. Whether we would actually have enough business to support 2 restaurants, we don't know at this point in time. And whether we would actually open up a barber shop and a beauty shop right away, that's also questionable.
Commissioner Westerberg?
In terms of parking, I think there was some discussion in the memo here regarding resurfacing the parking lot? Is
Yes.
that correct? Improving that? Would you be amenable to using environmental pavers in that area?
I believe we would. I did mention that at one point to the managing member of the LLC, and if we went forward with this, he said he might be amenable to paving the currently dirt-level parking lot.
Commissioner Halleck, did you? Okay. Commissioner Alvarado? Nothing? All right. Is there anything else you want to add right now? I'm going to see if there's anybody from the public who wishes to speak on this matter.
I have nothing further.
Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak on this particular matter? Some people signed up but didn't put cases next to their names. Not seeing any before, before you sit down. Is there anything you'd like to add in summation before we walk through our standards and make our recommendation?
No, sir, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Diddish. I appreciate it.
I have one additional question. This is for staff, actually. You noted in the memo that there was another special use for a cultural facility that was recommended by the ZBA, and then it was withdrawn, but there were certain conditions attached to that recommendation. Do you recall what those conditions were?
I believe it related to hours of operation, just
Okay.
because the cultural facility request, it was very minimal. It was roughly 400 square feet within the
This
building
facility,
that was
okay.
also
Yeah.
another use.
And again, it's another use, and it's not particularly relevant. I was just curious.
All right. With that, we will close the record and begin our deliberations. Again, we are a recommending body to City Council on this matter, so any decision that we make is a recommendation, and City Council will make the final determination. General thoughts from commissioners?
I'll go. Actually, I was pleasantly surprised to hear that there was an apartment hotel designation in the zoning code, because I think it offers flexibility to developers. And so, although I agree with the chairman about the customary, common, definition of what qualifies as the major use and the minor use, in my opinion, the definition clearly does not refer to that or give it a maximum. So I think they're following the definition, and I would vote to approve it.
Commissioner Linville?
Sure. I also, I agree with Commissioner Halleck, and frankly, in terms of the definition of apartment hotel, I would argue that the requirement for at least 25% transient guests has to do with distinguishing the apartment hotel from an apartment building. At which point because the notion is that there are transient guests and not permanent guests. And I think that given the location, the applicant could have just have easily asked for the property to be rezoned to D2, which is adjacent to the property, at which point a hotel would be a permitted use. So and again, I think that the whole notion of, permanent versus, transient guests, it gets into the whole question of, transient guests are paying hotel tax, and I guess this was another question I should have asked staff about how the hotel tax is structured. Would permanent guests be subject to the hotel tax? And I don't know if but the point is that transient guests will provide yet another revenue source for the city that, an apartment building would not.
Commissioner Westerberg?
I guess my only concern is you have a definition for apartment hotel, you have a definition for apartment, or just hotel, rather. and they end up seeming to serve the same use. So to me, it makes more sense if it is going to be called an apartment hotel and fit within current zoning, and it seems to me it does make sense to have a maximum number for transient guests.
Commissioner Arvalo?
I guess I have a question. When the definition is of the transient, the 25%, is that also, would that be considered for an Airbnb use as a transient? So that that apartment building would basically, you know, you would have a regular amount of people living there as an apartment, but then the other apartments would be considered Airbnbs?
So the definition for a transient guest versus a permanent guest is really, the transient does not have a lease and is occupying it on a daily or weekly basis, whereas a permanent guest is there for at least 30 days, and we would typically think there would be some sort of an agreement. Outside of a typical hotel, you don't sign a lease to move into your hotel.
But then, I guess,
So an Airbnb, in my opinion, would be transient guests.
okay.
But what about an extended stay hotel? I mean, that's another variation on this.
But that's a hotel. It's not an apartment hotel.
Well,
But
could
it's an
be.
extended stay. It
It
could be
could
a
be.
year. It could be, you know, you're, what you were saying about 30 days. I'm just saying that,
But is it more than 50% that are staying over 30 days?
yeah, that's your point. I get it.
So, anything else from commissioners? If not, I'll just add my 2 cents. I think it's a great project. I don't have a problem with the project at all. I have a project with the definition that's being used, and when we're done here, I'm going to be talking to city staff about making a change to our definitions to help clarify that. But that does us no good at this particular time because this is the definition with which we are working. I mean, like I said, I think it's a good project. I think my problem is that we're calling it something that it isn't, in my opinion, and that's where I have an issue with this. But with that, we do have a set of standards that we must go through and find are met before we can make a recommendation for approval to City Council. There are 9 of them in the special use category. The first one being that it is one of the special uses listed for the zoning district in which the property lies. I'm getting a sense from all the other commissioners, for the most part, that they are feeling that this standard is met. I, however, do not feel that this is met. I believe that this is actually operating as a hotel, not as an apartment hotel. And therefore, a hotel is not permitted in the residential districts. Number 2, it complies with the purposes and the policies of the comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinance. This is a property that has sat for some time, not being used. It's a large property, so its vacancy is noticeable to the neighborhood and to the city. And so being able to take something that was designed in such a way and continuing to refurbish it and make it feel give it new life and make it feel like it actually has a purpose, I'm all for, and I believe that this standard has been met. And again, there's been some discussion about if it's a hotel, there will be hotel taxes involved, and obviously, one of the things we look for in our comp plan is ways to generate income for our city. So I believe standard number 2 is met. Number 3, it does not cause a negative cumulative effect in combination with existing special uses or as a category of land use. This building really, it was built with this size density. At the time it was built in 1953. It's the use of it actually will have a purpose. It's near our downtown, so people who do stay here will be able to make use of our downtown easily. So I believe that standard is met. Number 4, does not interfere with or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood. I would argue it actually does quite the opposite. Having a large derelict building sitting on your block does not improve your properties. However, having a space that is functioning and usable and generating business and income for the city, I think would be a plus in this neighborhood, so that standard is met. Number 5, it is adequately served by public facilities and services. It's near our downtown core with buses. It's within walking distance to public transportation. There is parking that is provided for it, as well as the fact that I have to believe that all the other utilities, things like that, going to this building actually are adequate or would be made adequate without much difficulty, so that standard is met. Number 6, it does not cause undue traffic congestion. We didn't really hear testimony to this, but with the parking spaces that are being provided and with it being in our downtown core, we do believe that, or I do believe that this particular case, the traffic would be an incremental increase, but not something that would be detrimental to the downtown area. Number 7, it preserves significant historical and architectural resources. As the applicant mentioned, this is a property that is mid-century and sort of looks mid-century, and doesn't really look mid-century in a Mies van der Rohe sort of way. It is what it is, but hopefully when it's restored and repaired and everything, it will feel like it is a contributing member to the architectural interest of that particular block. Number 8, it preserves significant natural and environmental resources. There is quite a bit of open space on this lot. We have heard from the applicant that their intention is to keep it such, so that standard is met. And number 9, it complies with all other applicable regulations. Again, this would be a case where this particular applicant has done business in the city of Evanston for quite a while, as well as in surrounding neighborhoods. I have no reason to believe that any regulations that were placed before him would not be met. With the exception of number 1, does everyone agree with the rest of my findings on standards?
Yes.
All right. Are there any conditions that we feel should be included into this?
Well, let me suggest that if it is going to be an apartment hotel, different from a hotel, that we could institute a limit on the transient guests. I know not everyone feels that way, but I'm still trying to sort out apartment hotel versus hotel, and if it, as we've said before, if it walks like a duck, it probably is one.
Commissioner Limbold?
I am not as concerned about transient versus permanent guests, but I think that in terms of the inclusionary housing provisions that was mentioned in the staff memo, I think it's important to have some monitoring so we know, whether or not we're really dealing with, there's part of it. The question is how permanent is permanent. If somebody comes, for a 6-week assignment, extended stay assignment, and is living there, that's a lot different than somebody living there for a year or two. And I don't know if we've got any way of kind of tracking that, but it seems to me that in the annual property standards inspection or, the other licensing, that may be a way of kind of trying to get a handle on this. Because my feeling is really that until we know how this facility actually operates, it's really hard to say whether it's an apartment hotel or a hotel. And again, it would be not that onerous to rezone the property to, have it be a hotel.
Well, I mean, we're making a determination whether it's an apartment hotel or a hotel.
Right now.
By
Based-
virtue of this particular vote, because it either meets that standard or doesn't.
And I believe it meets the standard that it is a hotel and that standard 1 is.
So I guess my question, kind of, if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, is how do we know what rooms are permanent and therefore would be included in the inclusionary, I can't say
Yes.
the word, the IHO, and what would we be collecting hotel tax potentially on?
And it seems to me that given the definition of an apartment hotel, it would not necessarily be the same rooms that would be occupied by permanent guests, because they're all going to have kitchens. Sorry about that.
I believe staff would request, for simplicity's sake, that if you are looking to have a portion fall under the hotel tax and a portion fall under the IHO, that should then have a condition stating what that percentage is, so that there is a known quantity. It would be quite difficult to review it on a quarterly or yearly basis and then adjust those numbers.
Well, my feeling is that we should not make that a condition. I'm just thinking in terms of trying to monitor and have some information going forward, so that if we ever see a apartment hotel application again, we have some basis.
We will hopefully never see one under this definition again. So are there conditions? Commissioner Westerberg, you had mentioned something about paving. I don't know if you want to put that in a recommendation or a condition, or if it's just a,
I would love to see it as a condition that the repaved parking area use environmental pavers.
I mean, I'm fine adding that in. Obviously, since we're recommending here, city council can view that as they wish. But we can sort of ask for the things that we would like to see included. Not hearing anything else, I will ask if there is a motion for recommendation for approval of 1555 Oak Avenue.
May I clarify? We are saying that it is an apartment hotel, although there is going to be no condition upon what the percentage is for transient guests. Is that correct?
That is correct. A motion from somebody?
Okay. I move that we recommend approval of the special use permit application for 1555 Oak Avenue, 22 ZM JV-0085, with the condition that the applicant pave the unimproved parking lot with permeable pavers. I think that was the only condition we,
And that it just be in general compliance
and then
with
it
the
be,
testimony.
yes, and it be in general compliance with the application and testimony.
It has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Lindwall, seconded by Halleck. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Would you like to call the roll, please?
Before you do that,
Yep.
could you please provide a time frame for paving the parking lot, and keeping in mind that it may trigger MWRD review, which does take some time, so I would request at least 6 months, if not longer.
How about we
Okay,
just say a year?
a year, within a year.
Because 6 months could put us potentially back into times when you aren't paving very well, so. So with that one change to it, is there, or would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Aravallo?
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Linwall?
Yes,
Commissioner Westerberg?
No.
Chair Rogers?
No. So with a vote of 3-2, it does move forward with the positive recommendation to City Council. Staff will work with you on exactly when you will be appearing before council and the next steps as you move forward. Good luck with your project. Thank you. With that, we will move on to our second case of this evening, which is 1733 Oakton Street. It is an appeal, and this board is the determining body in this particular case. I don't know which staff member, Ms. Klotz, if you would please read it into the record.
1733 Oakton Street, 22 ZMJV 0088. Cheryl and Robert Munoz, property owners of 1729 Oakton Street, appeal the zoning administrator's decision to grant minor zoning relief, case number 22 ZMNV 0074, to construct a second-story addition with a proposed east interior side yard setback of 3.9 feet and an existing first story of 3.9 feet, section 6837, in the R2 Single Family Residential District. The appellant appeals the approval of the 3.9-foot east interior side yard setback variation and also appeals the overhang amount, or eave or yard obstruction, approved without variation. The Land Use Commission is the determining body for this case in accordance with Section 6388 of the Evanston Zoning Code and Ordinance 92021.
Thank you. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Hi, I'm Robert Munoz. I reside at 1729 Oakton Street here in beautiful Evanston.
Thank you, Mr. Muno. I know you have a presentation. Is there anything you wanted to say beforehand, or do you just kind of want to go right into the presentation?
Yeah, it's probably best that we go in directly. I've timed this out. It takes about 20 minutes, so if I seem to go long, I apologize in advance.
All right. Oh, we changed my light switch here. Does this light switch still work? There. And do you want to show him, do you know how to work? You got it working? Okay. All right.
We've prototyped it and we're ready to go.
All right. The floor is yours.
Okay, so I've lived here my whole life. My wife moved here in '99 when we purchased our current home at this address. Currently, Cheryl can't be here because she's in Pennsylvania caring for an aging parent and undergoing care for stage 3 breast cancer. She wishes she could be here in person, but I have her on the phone listening in. This is our agenda. We would like to touch on the city's comprehensive plan, the impact on our home, and the variation approval requirements as we work through this presentation. As I said before, Evanston's been my home for my entire life, and I love living here. We have a great city, don't we? We've been able to achieve a unique blend of character from classic to hip, which is not easy to do. A great amount of work and oversight on the part of the city employees and city residents goes into making sure everyone can continue to enjoy the excellent character as well as share in the benefits of our great hometown. On this slide, we listed the stated goals of the city's comprehensive plan that we feel are at odds on a few levels with the variance being requested. Preserving and maintaining a neighborhood character so that it remains desirable while carefully enhancing existing assets requires the delicacy of a surgeon's knife. We are here today to discuss the issue and the challenges this proposed variance is creating in the real-world application of what is, at this time, only a request. This is a photo of our modest home. We've owned and lived in this house since 1999. We love our open floor plan. We enjoy great quantities of light in our home. The fact is that Oakton Street leaves something to be desired. But our love for this property has kept us here when many other couples would have sold or traded up. Our single greatest worry regarding the proposal at 1733 is the change in the roof pitch. In recent years, storms have been quite violent and dumped vast quantities of rain. Our gutters to the front and rear of our house have had difficulty keeping up with the deluge at times. Fortunately, for all concerned, any overflow is directed to the front and the rear and not towards anyone else's property. With the proposed changes in the roof pitch, water, snow, and ice will be directed towards the west wall of our home. As you can see from this picture, there is a 6-foot property fence that spans the property line. The space on 1733 is narrow and slanted towards our property. Overflowing rain is going to channel into our yard. In winter, Snowmelt is going to create an ice hazard when it drips onto the frozen earth, migrates onto our property, and freezes. This will create a hazard, hardship, and liability where none currently exists. In addition to the ice liability, the cleaning of gutters is going to be nearly impossible using a 22-foot ladder with a steep angle. As an ETHS geometry graduate, I can tell you that Mrs. Payne would tell me that to avoid such a steep angle, in order to safely manage the cleaning, the ladder will need to be placed on our property, in the garden that we generally plant in that space. This creates a liability for us and detracts from the enjoyment of our property. Also, Evanston has a tree city designation, which is part of what creates such excellent character in our town. But all of those trees require multiple gutter cleanings annually. In our comprehensive plan, the city recognizes the need for natural light and desires that building designs reflect natural light patterns in an effort to reduce demand for electricity. As I said earlier, one of the attractions of our home is the great quantity of natural light that we enjoy. My wife describes our home to people by saying every room is absolutely resplendent with natural light. She reads a lot and has a great way with words, but in this respect, she is correct. We have excellent natural light in our home. This is one of the primary reasons we continue to stay in our home on busy Oakton Street. For the addition at 1733, the builder may be considering maximizing the amount of interior natural light exposure in that residence, but he is taking away natural light from our 1729 Oakton Street address. Our comprehensive plan does not specify that an architect needs to respect natural light patterns of nearby homeowners, but the aim is to reduce demand for electricity, and it is counterintuitive to remove a neighbor's natural light. While any addition would have an impact, this addition is more than a foot into the side yard setback. Therefore, we are losing more natural light than if a setback were in place. The city asserts that this request will not have a substantial adverse impact on adjoining properties, and in using the descriptor substantial, agrees that there is an adverse impact. With a driveway and required setback on the west side of the property, moving the addition to that wall would have the result that the adverse impact on neighbors would be negligible. Further, no variance would be needed. This would also allow the city to adhere to our stated comprehensive plan pursuant to maintaining natural light, as well as our city character by not having an imposing structure sitting within the side yard setback and looming over our home. The city has decided what they consider to be a substantial adverse impact, but as you will see, we feel this opinion is in the broad strokes. The city has recognized that noise pollution is an issue in our community. In our comprehensive plan, they have pointedly stated that this is an issue that is often overlooked. From our comprehensive plan, the city has said noise pollution, although sometimes overlooked, can seriously detract from the quality of life of our community. This city should continue to recognize this fact and maintain and enforce policies to minimize noise pollution. When we purchased our home in '99, properties to our immediate east and west were one-story structures. Within a few short years, 1725, directly to our east, was purchased and 2 contractors added 2 additional stories with the intention of flipping the home. Prior to that upward addition, our home and backyard were relatively peaceful and enjoyable quiet spaces. After that upward addition was added, our backyard became very noisy with the sound of Oakton traffic. The noise was being picked up and reflected into our space from the west wall of the structure at 1725. Because of this experience, we are all too well aware of how a structure can amplify sound. Also, Oakton has become a very busy roadway over the years. It has evolved from a sleepy street we moved into 1999 into a 24-hour, heavily traveled throughway we have today. With the addition of 1725, once we had the diffusion of sound, now we have a collection point. The sound is collected, amplified, and the waves are redistributed towards our home. The fact that 1733 is going to be in the form of a long wall facing our home will have greater surface area for sound waves to collect and reflect towards our home. This is an issue that is going to be a natural occurrence when an addition is added to 1733. Our objection is that this collection of sound waves and amplification will be directly next to both of our bedrooms. Every foot of space further away from this structure is moved will allow greater diffusion of sound waves. The city disagrees, but we believe in part this is a problem that has been created by 1733 Oakton. The city contends that the issue of non-conforming interior side yard setback is not self-created. The applicant did not build her home within the setback. This is not debatable. It is in choosing this particular option we have here today for addition that the applicant has self-created an issue. There are other options available for this addition. We were given many reasons why they were not being pursued. Ease of tying into the bathroom plumbing, stair placement, long narrow room, and moving utilities. We contend that some of these reasons are tilting at windmills. Alternative options exist. They will be slightly more costly, but then again, they might not be. How are we to know? We have not seen a budget or cost comparison or of doing it any other way. Many of the homes in this style on both Main Street and Oakton have opted to add a rear addition. This is an example of a rear addition on a home in the 1600 block of Oakton. The house was built in the 50s along with many others in this style, and the lot is about the same. A garage on the property is in the same proximity as those on 1733. As you can see from the rear view and the side view, this house enjoys a decent-sized rear addition. The green space on the property remains ample. So, apologies for the low-light photograph. I've been working on a project. I didn't get home until dark. I guess you probably know what I mean by that. This slide depicts the rear of our home. The ladder is a fixture since we frequently clean our gutters to prevent clogging. We love our 5 old-growth cottonwoods. And we bought this property. We quickly found out that it drops a lot more than leaves. There's quantities of sappy micro leaves in the spring. Also, sticks, fruit from the cotton when a cotton exits, long spines after pollen's released, and long dried spines which fall after the cotton spreads. At any rate, the rear addition on our home is very large, and yet it still allows us to have a nice patio and large amount of green space in our rear and side yard. As you can see from the photo, our gas and electric have been moved. The gas was moved. It took about an hour for NICOR to shoot the line. I'm presuming that in any remodeling, the electrical will have to be removed, reworked. This is our very green backyard and the pups, Royal and Gracie. We really enjoy this space. Even with our sizable addition, we have a lot of usable space for relaxation and enjoyment, but not for a garden. The only strip that we have is in the setback area. As you can see, we attempt to be green through activity of minimizing drying use during the summer months. That's why you see the old school. There's ample space exists for a room addition, much like the other homes of this style, built in the 50s. 1733 has the option of adding a rear addition. These additions can very nearly double the space of our tiny homes. Another view, there's a substantial amount of room available. And note, you can see the top of our addition and garage just over the privacy fence. For building up, this is a simple mock-up of a slightly different option of the building on the west wall. In this view, we utilize the west wall and the long bedroom wall as part of the structural support versus the short bedroom wall. This will enable the access to the bathroom plumbing the contractor expressed his desire to tap into. That being said, there's also a laundry stack in this house, which is noted in the call-out, and access to the plumbing in the kitchen on the northwest wall. In this plan, the stairs can remain as planned, but the direction reversed. We realize the builder has a plan, and he would like to put his plan in place. Kitchen entryway, chimney, the chosen floor plan in general should all be items that can be worked around. We are being led to believe that there is only one plan that will work for this home, and that simply cannot be the case. The one plan only view seems myopic at best. In summary, there are multiple issues that the immediate neighbor to the east feel are impactful. The city has said there is not substantial impact on us, and if we were looking at one of these issues, we would probably agree. Unfortunately, we're looking at multiple issues, and when taken cumulatively, have a substantial impact on us both financially through potential liability and in the way in which we are able to enjoy our space. The city points to other neighborhoods where setbacks issues exist, but many of those neighborhoods were built long before we had our current zoning regulation. When reviewing requested changes that require a variance, the city gives every appearance of caring through the solicitation of comments for people affected in the 200-foot radius. In this case, 3 people have expressed a desire not to allow this variance, and the city has minimized these concerns. We've left feeling our opinions count for little. And this is a continuing motif for the people on Oakton Street. I want you to be aware of that. As residents of the city of Evanston, we're perplexed as to why the city solicited feedback, yet all the feedback has been minimized. We are people with very real experiences and feelings resulting from these experiences. Having read through the packet for this public hearing, we can only express regret that some of the staff's comments seem callous indeed. We feel that we are being made the enemy simply because we are expressing concerns and attempting to minimize the impact on our home. Further, we fail to understand why our reasoning is being minimized simply because something may be under the view of property standards rather than zoning. Residents voicing valid concerns should not have to wait until post-construction to learn everything they feared is now a reality. These concerns should be considered and addressed before a structure is built, even if the requirement is to have the property standards and any other relevant department weigh in. On the part of 1733's request, their reasoning for this particular plan may be due to the cheaper price tag, but over the long haul, if this is the case, their cost savings is spread to us in terms of future liability and enjoyment in our home. We cannot stress this enough, Cheryl and I. We're not without sympathy for our neighbor and her desire to add space. We would be overjoyed if she were to employ another option for her addition. Unfortunately, the encroachment into the setback is going to create issues for us that will be ongoing. We would like Ms. June to enjoy her home as much as possible, just like we have. We respectfully request that another remedy be undertaken to ameliorate the additional space requirements at 1733. In closing, I would like you to ask yourself, if you were facing this addition next door to your home with all of these same conditions, would you want this variance request approved? Thank you for your time. Cheryl and I appreciate your patience as we work through the steps of the approval process.
Thank you, Mr. Muno. Are there questions from board members?
I just have one quick one. How far from the, I guess, the west side of your property is where is the west line of your house? Is it within the setback, or is it 10 feet, roughly?
I'm gonna try to make a joke here. I don't know exactly, and my mom said, please be specific. But when I used to go to the deli, and we would ask the people who cut the meat how we would want it, and we'd say paper thin. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. It's paper thin.
So my question, was
Right.
really, do
I
you
don't know
combine?
exactly.
Yeah.
Again,
Are you 5 feet away from your property line? Is the side of your house?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it
have not-
looked,
yeah.
when I was driving and looking, it looked like there was at least 5 feet.
It's paper thin, and it's about a good row of tomatoes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Since this is an appeal from the decision of our zoning administrator, you may have a seat, Mr. Muno, if you'd like. I will ask our zoning administrator and/or her designee, I don't know if you're speaking to this or if Mr. Griffith will be speaking to this or if you'll both be speaking to it. But give us your reasoning and your thinking behind the relief you granted.
The minor variation was granted ultimately because staff felt that it met the standards for minor variations, which do have a lower threshold than standards for major variations. Within those standards, staff looked for alternatives and did find that if the addition was placed on the other side of the house, then it creates challenges construction-wise, and if the addition was placed towards the rear of the house at grade, it would trigger other variations. So with the size of the addition proposed, the location did seem appropriate. Adding into that, we did look at the overall height and bulk proposed, and the addition is, I believe, at 22 feet in height, where 35 feet is allowed, so it is not maximizing the bulk for the zoning district. And additionally, we did look at the character of the block and noted that most of the houses on that side of the street are 2 stories, and most of those 2 stories are taller than 22 feet.
Could you address in particular water issues? That's where I would like to get a little more insight from you.
Things considered relating to stormwater and drainage include if the addition were at grade, that would increase the amount of impervious on the property and could create drainage issues in that regard. But by building up, it no longer does that. Additionally, the city has regulations for drainage. Gutters and downspouts are not allowed to drain within 10 feet of a property line. And if in the event that gutters become clogged, that is a property maintenance issue. That is not something that we can control before it happens. But if it were to happen, then the city would take action on that.
And where does this water, because we're looking at roughly a just under 4-foot setback. So where is the water that comes off the roof there being deposited?
It would need to drain maybe towards the front yard, but most likely towards the center of the backyard, towards the garage of 1733 Oakton.
Excuse me, can I add to that? I thought it was an ordinance in Evanston, based on my house, that all gutters need to go to downspouts, and downspouts need to go directly into the sewer system or the ground. I don't know. They don't empty onto the surface.
No, they have to empty onto the surface now. They used to, there was, 20, 30 years ago, there was an ordinance that required them all to be disconnected from the sewer system.
Correct. 1 and 2 family residential cannot drain into the sewer system. I do not believe there's a requirement to force the gutters into the ground, but that is something that is done at some properties where then there's a drain pipe that runs further into the center of the property and disperses the water there just to further.
I think that's what I have, actually.
I'd like to refer Commissioner Halleck to property standards for investigation now.
I think that's what I have. It's underground. But
No.
in any case, water in this case can be directed to the front or the back because it's not allowed to go to another property, that's for sure.
Correct. The building permit would not be issued until an approvable stormwater plan is provided.
Are there other questions for Ms. Klotz? Mr. Westerberg?
Did you have a chance to speak with a homeowner about the possibility of even offsetting the second floor a little bit, just to provide a little more space there and light? Is that a possibility?
I don't believe that staff suggested that. That tends to create other construction problems. I am aware that the property owner and neighbor did have discussions about any way to not have the variation request.
Mr. Muno is raising his hand, so I'm going to ask you if you'd come up to the microphone, please, so you can be heard.
I apologize, but I've had no discussions with the neighbor.
Okay.
The first I heard of it was when I got the postcard informing me of that. And the pitch of the roof is east-west. How does that work? That it wouldn't.
The water would come down the drain pipe, and then the drain pipe would have to be extended or run underground to get more towards the center of their property.
The water on the roof goes to a drain pipe that goes into the sewer.
Not into the sewer.
Or
just into the center of the property. And I do apologize for misspeaking that there was communication between the neighbors.
That's fine, thank you. Other questions from commissioners? Mr. Muno, is there anything that you would like to say in summation before we close the record and begin deliberation?
Oakton Street is under stress.
Thank you. I was going to say, I don't see anybody else signed up for this, so I'll just ask real quickly. I think everybody's here for our next two cases. So with that, I will close the record and we will begin our deliberations. I'll ask for general thoughts from commissioners. Commissioner Halleck?
To me, this is very straightforward. I don't know. I believe, and I think most people believe, most cities believe that residents do not own views or light. You can't. It just doesn't exist. So that right doesn't exist. I think that has been stated that the nonconforming setback was not self-created by the owners of the house. From a construction standpoint, the idea of a setback is not practical because that wall is probably a bearing wall and it would be very difficult to offset it. They could have built, as far as which side the addition could be built on, they could have built a two-story within their right. I mean, I'm sorry, a complete two-story within their right. So to me, that's a non-issue. And I also don't believe that, so as far as the zoning is, I think it's a minor variation that should be allowed. Is the practical solution to bear on that wall. And I don't think that a neighbor should be able to tell a property owner how or where to build additional space on their property. So,
Commissioner Westerberg?
I agree that a neighbor shouldn't be allowed to do that. But the flip side of that is that a neighbor shouldn't have to pay the price for water infiltration, which is a substantive issue. So I think, however this addition is created, there has to be some good engineering that goes into that. The city needs to look at it and really verify that before a permit is issued. That can be a problem, to have water coming in. There should not be a problem if the gutters are set up properly and they drain properly, but that does have to be verified, and I think that's a legitimate concern.
Commissioner Lindwall?
I agree with Commissioner Halleck. It makes the most sense to build the addition up from the, not to try to offset the setback to comply. I am not as concerned about, I think that the gutter and downspout, requirements are such that there won't be an issue. I actually happen to live in a situation where there is a roof overhang that on my neighbor's property it's probably well above 30 feet that does, really kind of come right to the property line. And I've got a sidewalk and I have not had an issue with ice falling in the winter, amazingly enough. And amazingly enough, the property owner was able to get a ladder to go up to 30 feet within that narrow setback. So for those reasons, I'm going to support the zoning administrator's decision.
just let me add to the gutter situation. There are some really cool inventions for anyone who's interested on how to prevent gutters from clogging. And I forget the brand name, and I don't want to advertise it, but your gutters will not clog if you put this material on top of them. So there's a really easy solution to this that is cost effective, by the way, rather than clean it periodically.
Anything you'd like to add?
I agree with the zoning administrator decision.
I'll just say that, one of the things that we often heard on ZBA, et cetera, was, people building on an existing non-conforming wall. I can't think of a single case in which we did not let someone do that. It just makes sense logistically to carry the weight from a second story down to the first floor to the ground. My concern is with the water. I would ask that as we move this through the process, that special attention be paid to that, to make sure that we are not putting water somewhere else. I know that, what our code says and everything, but I would ask staff to keep a close eye on that. And the same with the neighbor, to make sure anything that is done is called to staff's attention at that time. Because this is an appeal of the zoning administrator, we do hear the case very much like we were hearing the case for the first time. It is a minor variation. There is a different set of standards for minor variations than major variations. There are 5 standards that must be met. The first standard is the practical difficulty is not self-created. The interpretation that we've always used on self-created is when somebody wants to build something that actually violates without a reason. The fact that they want to build onto a first floor that's existing is not something that they have created on their own, and therefore the legally non-conforming wall should be allowed to be built on, like I said, based on previous years of experience. Number 2, the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. This is one of those things where I think even the appellant made reference to this. Everything has an adverse impact. Everything that's done impacts somebody in some way. And so what we are often tasked with is weighing what is that impact. I think the addition of the second story, while having an impact is not substantial, I would say as long as we can make sure that water is retained on this property and not shoved off onto neighboring properties, we don't move into the substantial adverse impact. So I believe that standard is met. Number 3, the requested variation is in keeping with the comprehensive general plan and zoning ordinance. We often see people who are trying to improve homes. I drive Oakton fairly regularly and know that a number of these homes have been changed, some for the better, some for the worse, over the years. But we do have people who are constantly trying to get a little extra space out of their rooms. Some of these homes on Oakton are actually smaller, I believe, than my condo, and I don't have a large condo. So I think that by allowing someone to add on to a house in a way that is even a minor variation is perfectly acceptable. Number 4, the requested variation is consistent with the preservation policy set forth in the comprehensive general plan. Obviously, one of the things that we are talking about here is the green space that we often have. We've heard some discussion about building into the rear yard, which is what some people have done. But often what happens in those particular cases is we end up going over on building lot coverage, impervious surface, things like that, which actually do create a more difficult way to retain water on a property, in my opinion. So I believe this standard is met. And number 5, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified before the zoning administrator issues her decision regarding said variation. We often have discussion about what is the minimum and the least deviation. We've heard testimony that this structure is about 22 feet tall and something that could be 35 feet tall. I know there is one particular home in this neighborhood that has had basically an entire new home built on top of it, which would create a much greater impact. I think that the deviation in terms of the side yard setback, again, asking people to either move things further or closer from the property line, and not taking advantage of the structure as it is, creates big problems for people. So I believe that this standard is also met. Commissioner Halleck?
I just want to add one more thing. I think this is significant. We talked about 3.9 feet versus 5 foot required. Actually, that zone varies. as you go north, it increases. So at the widest point, that setback is 4.66 feet, which is just a few inches short of 5 feet. And then it narrows to 3.9 at the south end of the house. So it's not like it's 3.9 all the way up.
All right. Anything else from commissioners? With that, I will ask if there is a motion, and the one thing I would request is maybe a condition on that is, again, paying particular attention to water mitigation to keep water on the property as opposed to sending it off to neighboring properties. Commissioner Lindwall?
Sure, and just a point of clarification, we need to have, since we're the determining body, we need to have 5
We need to have
votes.
five votes, and so if we do not get 5 votes off the 5 of us who are here tonight, the matter would be continued, but there would be no further discussion. It would just be an open vote that is held open until 5 votes went one way or the other.
Okay. I move that the Land Use Commission affirm the decision of the zoning administrator with respect to 1733 Oakton Street, 22 ZMJV-0088, with the instruction that as the project moves forward through the permitting process, that city staff pay particular attention to the stormwater detention system, or stormwater management system.
Is there a second? Been moved by Lindwall, seconded by Halleck. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Aravalo?
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck? Yes. Commissioner Lindwall?
Yes?
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
Yes, with 5 votes, we do reach the majority that we need to reach for a determination. And so the appeal of the the decision of the zoning administrator is upheld.
If the commission could also review the Eve appeal, I know it was not discussed tonight, but it was part of the application, and it would not follow those same standards. If you look at the paragraph in the memo just under the standards listed, you need to determine if the Eve interpretation that a 4-inch eave is considered compliant, if that interpretation is considered arbitrary, ill-considered, or erroneous.
But we don't have any true standards to go through on this particular one. This is one of those that we just
Correct.
make a decision based on our best, the information that's been provided to us. Is there a motion to uphold the decision of the zoning administrator in regard to the obstruction of the yard based on the eve of, you said it's 4 inches, right? Yes, a 4-inch eve on the property.
I'll move to accept the 4-inch eve based on the zoning administrator's recommendations.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you call the roll for that one, please?
Commissioner Aravalo?
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck? Yes. Commissioner Lindwall?
Yes?
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
Yes. So with 5 concurring votes, again, that meets the standard that we need to have. So a 4-inch eve, which was the decision of the zoning administrator, is upheld. Thank you. With that, we move on to the special use and major variations for 1801, 1805 Church Street. Whose project is this? Michael, Mr. Griffith?
Yes, this is mine. This is a special use and major variation for 1801, 1805 Church Street and 1708 to 1710 Darrow Avenue, case number 22ZMJV-0088. 2022-0089. The applicant submits for a special use for religious institution use in the West Evanston Overlay District exceeding 10,000 square feet but less than 40,000 square feet, and submits for the following major variations from the Evanston zoning code: to reduce the required front yard build-to zone from 5 to 25 feet to 0 feet at the upper floors, to reduce the required west interior side yard setback from 5 feet to 0 feet, to increase the impervious surface coverage from 60% plus an additional 20% of semi-pervious surface material to a total of 90.3%, to increase building height from 2 stories or 30 feet to 3 stories at 44 feet, and that was measured to the parapet, to eliminate the required building stoop base type from a storefront base, to eliminate the required building stoop base type and provide a storefront base type instead, to provide occupied space behind the building parapet cap type where the occupied space is not permitted, to eliminate the required 1 short loading berth, to increase the yard obstruction from 10% to 40% into the corner side setback for the exterior building fins and vertical trellis, to eliminate the required 3 to 4 foot tall steel or PVC picket fence around the parking area, all for a proposed religious institution that's 3 stories, located in the B2 Business District, the West Evanston Overlay District. The Land Use Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, the determining body for this case, in accordance with Zoning Code Section 6359 and Ordinance 92-0 or 021.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Is the applicant, I didn't know which one of you was presenting. If you would like to come up and sort of introduce yourselves to us, and I think you were sworn while you were out in the antechamber. I'll trust you on that one.
It's good to trust the pastor.
Yeah, you know, if you can't trust a pastor, who can you trust? So if you would like to introduce yourselves and tell us about your project.
Sure. My name is Clifford Wilson. I serve as the senior pastor of Mount Pisgah Ministry since 1987 at that location. We've been in ministry for 49 years here in the city of Evanston. We've raised 4 children here, all attendees of Evanston Township High School. My son received the first Martin J. Leone Award for football, as he got a scholarship to play football for Indiana State. All my kids have done very, very well, and the work that we've been doing over this last 30 or so years at our location, we plan to continue that and expand it. One of the things that we want to do is have, I hate the term soup kitchen, but that would be probably the thing that you recognize and understand, something that would serve the people in the 5th and 2nd wards, which would prevent them from having to go downtown, where it's probably the only one that I know of that serves food for people who are in need. And so we're asking that you do this for us, that we will be able to continue the ministry here, and that's basically all we want to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Richard Koenig. I'm the Executive Director of Housing Opportunity Development Corporation. We're a nonprofit organization that develops affordable housing throughout Chicago's northern suburbs. The organization has been around for the past 40 years, and I've been the Executive Director for the past 25 years. We've completed over 30 affordable developments, over 500 affordable units throughout all northern suburbs, including properties. We have 5 properties here currently in Evanston that we've had since 1998. As the zoning staff have mentioned, they announced the first project, although these 2 projects need to go through together. So in your package, you have information on both projects. And what we're going to present today is going to involve both projects. They can't be separated. If you want to go ahead and flip through to the next slide, or do I have that control? Yeah, this is the one that the slide presentation. And maybe the next slide, please. So these are the 2 lots that we're talking about. Just to give everyone some context, We're talking about the property on the corner from 1801 Church Street all the way over to 1815 Church Street. Dodge Avenue is on the left and Darrow is on the right. The property that's outlined in yellow is currently property that's owned by Mount Pisgah Ministry, and the building on the west side of that site is the current Mount Pisgah Ministry building. The rectangle in red is currently owned by the City of Evanston. The city acquired that property, I believe, in 2019, and there were underground storage tanks that were removed, and that environmental condition was remediated. The City of Evanston put forth a request for proposals back in January 2020 to redevelop the site in red. And Mount Pisgah and HODC were the two applicants that applied to get that site, and we decided and agreed to partner together to redevelop that half of the block along Church Street. So these two projects are tied together. What we're proposing to do is have what's happened so far is the City of Evanston has authorized the staff to talk with us about what the development could be on this site, and the potential of being able to secure that lot on the corner. What we propose to do is, once we get ownership of the site and that site is transferred to the city, the 1801 site, is we propose to flip them so that Mount Pisgah Ministry would then be on the corner of Church and Darrow to build a new church, and you have all the information in the plans in your packets. And in the middle of the block would be a brand new apartment building. It would be apartments that would be affordable to low-income households. And so we would maintain the same size parcels of land that we have right now, but what the end result would be a revitalized block. The lot on the corner has been vacant for 40, 45, 50 years now. Formerly a gas station, there's been nothing there for a long time. And our goal is to really revitalize that by creating a new church, a new residential apartment building, and new retail space. If you could flip to the next slide, please. So again, this is a street view that you have in your packets, but it shows the new building on the west side of the site where the current church would come down, and the width of the site is the current width of the city-owned lot, and then on the east would be the church building. Cliff, if you want to talk more about the church.
Yeah, Mount Pisgah Ministry has been a non-denominational ministry in the city of Evanston that primarily try to minister to families, especially families that are single parent homes, and we've been very, very successful at that. We have quite a few people who have gone through our ministry that no longer live in the city of Evanston. The last young man that might be of some note, which his name was Rodney Pryor. He played basketball for Georgetown, and he was also in the draft in the NBA, and he ended up playing basketball overseas, and he's right now still in the G League, and he's doing great things. He's following his dream, and he's introducing a business to the high schools as an alternative measure for the main suppliers of uniforms, and he wants to make it less expensive so that the lower income schools would be able to afford those uniforms. And so we've done quite well, and we've been recognized in this city as a viable ministry. I've been pastoring here for 49 years. As a matter of fact, you're looking at right now the longest tenured pastor in the city of Evanston, active tenured pastor in the city of Evanston. So we thank you for the opportunity to stand before you today and to say to you that we look forward to 49 more years if God should let us live. And thank you so very much.
Could you do the next slide, please? So that's some background on the church's use. Now I'll talk a little bit about the residential use. There's some information in your packet, but I'll sort of briefly go through so the audience can understand more about the project.
So I'm going to interject just a moment there. Since we kind of are hearing these two cases together, I'm going to ask that the second one be read into the record so everyone knows what you're asking for on the second one, so that as we talk together, we'll separate them back out at the end.
Separate or redo if you want. It's just hard to do one at a time, right?
I think we have to look at this holistically, because I don't think us approving one without the other or recommending one without the other, anything like that is a little odd. So, Mr. Griffith, do you want to read the second part of the case, which is 0092 into the record, please?
Sure, this is for the HODC project. They're requesting major variation. The address is 1811 to 1815 Church Street. It also includes the parcels on Adaro Avenue, 1708 to 1710, case 22ZMJV-0092. The applicant is asking for the following major variations from the Evanston zoning code: to reduce the required front yard build-to zone from 5 to 10 feet to 0 feet, reduce the required west and east interior side yard setbacks from 5 feet to 0 feet, reduce the required rear yard setback from 5 feet to 0 feet, to increase the maximum permitted impervious surface coverage from 90% plus an additional 5% semi-pervious surface area to a total of 99.7% of lot area, to increase the maximum permitted building height from 3 stories and 47 feet to 5 stories and 57.7 feet, to eliminate the required 8-foot ziggurat setback at the 3rd story, eliminate the required 1 short loading berth in order to construct a 5-story mixed-use building with ground floor retail, 44 dwellings, and on-site parking in the B2 Business District and the West Evanston Overlay District. The Land Use Commission is the determining body for this case in accordance with Zoning Code Section 6-3-8-2 and Ordinance Number 92-0-21.
I have a question for staff that I was going to ask, but now that we're kind of moving these two together somewhat, it is a little odd for us to be determining body on something that is going to be so directly impacted by something that is a special use recommending. Does staff foresee any issues if we were to move forward with one but not the other? And I don't know what the case is. I just want to throw that out there. Quite often when we hear cases where there's a special use, it kind of ties into we make everything part of a recommending. Commissioner Westerberg, do you have a?
Different question.
Okay, or if law even wants to weigh in on that, I don't know. I don't mean to throw this at you kind of out of the blue, but.
Do you want us to break so they can think about it?
I'll give him just a second. I mean, theoretically, we could make a determination, and whatever city council does, that then they would be able to decide how they want to move forward based on that. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and continue the hearing while you consult with law, if that's okay. So,
Chair Rogers, one quick question. I understand we already have a request for a continuance. Is that something we'll deal with?
we'll deal with
after
that when we
testimony?
get to citizen comment, because anybody who is here, we would like to be able to take comment as well. So that is something that will weigh in as well during this, but I wanted to get input from staff on the other. With that, I will return to our regular presentation, and Mr. Koenig, if you would like to go ahead and pick up where you left off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, appreciate it. So more about the residential proposal for the middle of the block. What we're proposing to build is a new 5-story building. There'll be 44 rental units. All of the units in the building would be 60% of AMI or would qualify as low income. Therefore, it meets 100% of the inclusionary housing ordinance. All of the units would there be affordable. The targeted population would be families, seniors, people who work in the area, people with disabilities. It would be open to anybody. There would be no restriction other than income-based. We have requested a priority for Evanston residents. Under federal fair housing laws, you typically are not allowed to do a preference for local residents. As you can imagine, that may cause a problem in some communities. In working with council members, we are working with the HUD and other regulatory bodies to determine whether or not we're allowed to provide that preference so that we can create a preference for Evanston residents and move them to the top of the wait list as requested. The building itself would contain a community room, offices for on-site staff. We'd have laundry on site. The building would receive a green certification. We would apply to get Enterprise Green Community Certification, so it would be built energy efficient, be built as especially green. An interesting feature that people might be interested in is that the property would be back on the tax rolls. Currently, the church is not paying taxes. The city's not paying taxes on the corner lot. And even though it is a affordable apartment building, a residential building, we are required to pay income tax, real estate taxes to Cook County. So it would be back on the tax rolls as the building currently stands. So what does affordable mean? We would propose to charge rents that would be below market so that lower income households who would income qualify would be able to afford the rents. The building, we're proposing a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The 1 bedrooms would be $600 to $800, the 2 bedrooms $700 to $900, and the 3 bedrooms $900 to $1,100. We would be required to maintain those affordability levels for a minimum of 30 years. As a nonprofit organization, it would be our goal to keep and maintain those in perpetuity, to make those units affordable to Evanston residents and keep them affordable for the area for as long as we possibly can. The goal is to provide high-quality, low-cost housing for Evanston residents and really help revitalize that block. So the combination of retail space on the first floor, residential apartments above, the church next door, we're really hoping would revitalize and kickstart that neighborhood and really create greater community amenities for that block and for the west side of Evanston. Michael, if you do the next slide. So that's briefly what we wanted to present. We wanted to just let you know what we're talking about for the presentation. Pastor Wilson and I are available to answer any other questions or any other details that you want to dig into. We're not sure what other questions you would have. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. I got a head nod towards our attorney, so I think our attorney has something to contribute.
Thank you, Chair Rogers, members of the Land Use Commission, Alex Ruggie, Deputy City Attorney. So after consulting with staff, we believe that both applications will move together to City Council for final approval because they are so intertwined. We do believe that it's best that the project moves forward in the same fashion, and that is how the Land Use Commission has handled other projects similarly.
Okay, so in both cases, we will recommend to City Council since it is kind of one project.
Yes, even though it's two applications and it's bifurcated in the agenda, it is one project, and because City Council is the determining body for the special use, both applications will move together.
Okay. Commissioner Halleck, is that you that's
Yep.
turned on your light?
Yep. One question, getting right to one of the major arguments here. If we were to recommend approval, but with a housing building that was 4 stories instead of 5 stories, what would the impact of that be?
I don't think a project would be feasible at that level. It's
You would not do the project if it was approved at 4 stories?
financially, it just would make it financially infeasible. The site is difficult to develop right now, and there's such a need in the community for those affordable units that I think just cutting it off for the sake of chopping off units doesn't address the affordable housing issue and makes the project financially infeasible.
Commissioner Lindvall?
Sure, I have actually a couple of questions. The first has to do with the requested 0 rear yard setback for the apartments. What would happen if you were, if we did not recommend that variation? Would the units just be smaller? It looked like you might lose a couple of parking spaces, but you have, more than you're required as it is. What would be the impact on that? And then the second question is really what happens if Public Works and the Parking Division doesn't agree with your proposal for the loading in front of the building?
It's all intertwined. Those are good questions. It's all complicated, and we've put a lot of thought into how it all fit together. But on the backside, on the alley, I think that if we needed to come in, I don't know what the arbitrary amount that we need to come in to just meet that setback requirement. It would shrink the size of the units. It would squeeze it down, make the building even tighter, make some of the units even smaller. and I think we've tried to make them as generous as we can. They meet affordable housing standards, and so it would just make them smaller without a lot of advantage to the building. The way that we have the alleyway with the approach to the driveway into the back, come off the alley and be able to go up and go down and meet that driveway. Some of the criticisms about parking are that there's never enough parking, and so we're trying to at least meet that one-to-one and have that amount of parking that we need. And so losing spaces doesn't give me an advantage, it just makes it tighter and harder to make that many parking
Yeah,
spaces available.
but on the other hand, that's a 16-foot alley, and that's a big building, and I think that, you know, driving down that alley, most of the properties look like they have at least some setback. It may not be the full 5 feet in all cases, but, you know, so that's a concern. And then again, can you weigh in on the not having the loading berth that would be required for both of the uses, and the shared loading berth, and whether or not you've had discussions with Public Works about whether or not that is an acceptable alternative? Yes.
I did speak to Public Works, and they're fine with using the on-street loading as a shared space. It would be a shared space for the entire block, so it wouldn't be designated for any particular use or business, but they're okay with that.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Westerberg?
So just to push a little further on this loading dock issue, what's the reason that you can't incorporate it within the building, share it perhaps with the church? I mean, Church Street is a pretty busy street, and you've got traffic, you've got people trying to park there, you have residents. The idea of tying up space on the street, you know, for loading, move-ins, move-outs, seems to me to be really troublesome. So can you talk a little bit about how you could possibly accommodate that within the building?
Right, I think that to put the space in the building loses parking spaces, loses the usable space that we can within the building. So trying to maximize the amount of parking spaces, trying to maximize the flow in and out of the building on the backside. We simply chopping that out makes it harder for us to be able to use that space. I think that because of the amount of time that it would be practically used, I mean, we don't have that many turnovers. It's not used that often for move-ins and move-outs. For deliveries and drop-offs, it's not used that frequently. So the loss of the trade-off, obviously the trade-off is how often is it used versus how much space does it chew up. And we decided to weigh on the side if we wanted to have the parking, we wanted to have the units, we wanted to have the space available in the building. And because of the little user amount of times that would be used, practically speaking, there's space that's available on the street. And sort of with the church being there right now, their experience that space isn't used very often on the street as it is.
Right, understood. But for the church, it might be more something you use on a Sunday, correct?
Yes, mostly Sundays.
Right. I'm concerned more about what happens with the community during the week with the residents. And so that's just a concern I have, that to me, to not have a loading dock, if you are going to go 5 stories, that seems to me something that you should be able to work with. That's all.
Another.
Commissioner Linville?
Sure. Going back to the zero front setback for the residential piece, you also indicated that there's going to be planters. Are they extending into the public sidewalk, or is the retail window recessed like a foot? You know, where are you putting the planters?
Let me verify with the architect, John. They stick out 2 feet in front of the east wall of the south wall of the building. So they do protect on the sidewalk 2 feet out.
All right, so that would be something that the city would have to grant you permission to do. So I don't know if the city has discussed that or not.
That would be a building permit detail that would be discussed with Public Works at Dapper.
Okay. And then I guess the other note is that you're going to have a trash chute for the trash, but the tenants would be required to take their recycling and compostables down to the trash room. Is that a practice you use in your other facilities, and how does it work?
It's It is, and it's the practical solution because people are less likely to differentiate. And what we found in the past is that everything ends up in the trash, and they don't. People aren't using the trash and recycling for recycling. They know when they want to recycle. They take the recycling and they go and they put it in the special place versus everything going in and trying to remember which chute it goes into and getting into the wrong chute. It creates more of a mess if we do it that way. This way, it's intentional. When
Right.
you recycle, you recycle.
And it works well?
Yes.
Okay. That's it.
Commissioner Halleck?
Question for staff. The overlay district, I understand, maybe incorrectly, that these would not be variations if it was the underlying zoning and it wasn't a special overlay district. Is that true or not?
A good chunk of the variations being requested for both projects are triggered by the overlay district regulations.
So what is I know we've had discussions here and there about the overlay districts and whether they're still appropriate or not. What is the current thinking that it's here to stay? It's
Staff did have a discussion with the Planning and Development Committee where it was acknowledged that the overlay district presents challenges. However, to date, the overlay district is a part of the zoning ordinance, and so.
But there is this discussion going on about, and could you expand on the challenges?
Largely, the challenges are that it is form-based code, which in a perfect world, it dictates exactly what to build where. But
Shape
we
of
are
the
not in
building and all
a
that,
perfect
yeah.
world, and we are now 15, 20 years later, and a lot of things have changed. And at this point, at least some of the overlay regulations are impractical to current construction.
Okay.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Question, I guess, to staff on the existing ministry is actually abuts the three-story building directly to the west now. And you would have the same thing with the new apartment building, but that's going to go up, obviously, considerably more in height. What have you got there in terms of how you can handle stormwater issues with that building, because you are going to cover so much more of the surface area?
The stormwater regulations require that the stormwater be maintained on the property and actually retained. So the applicant is proposing a stormwater vault that would collect the water, hold it, and then slowly release it into the alley.
And is there any problem with the soil remediation on the adjoining lot and how those two things will work together?
That would be beyond me, but that'd be something that would need to be looked at a building permit stage.
When you say released to the alley, slowly released to the alley, do you mean slowly released into the sewer system under the alley, not the surface of the alley? Yes, okay.
All right. We have several people who have signed up to speak, so I'd like to move on to citizen comment. We'll call you back up afterward to address anything. I do have 6 people who have signed up to speak this evening. So I'm going to call your name. I'm not going to put time limits, but I will ask you to please be timely with your discussions and do relate them to this particular project. The first one is Carlos Sutton. Mr. Sutton?
No worries.
Thank you.
Good evening. Carlos Sutton, a 70-year resident of this community. 1 block away from this proposed development. Number one, when this overlay district was imposed upon the 5th Ward, it was done by citizens from all over the city of Evanston, and we had a west side plan that directly contradicts and is in direct opposition to this proposed project. I adamantly oppose it and do not recommend that you give this kind of commitment to the city of Evanston to be considered. 16 variations. If that's not a prima facie evidence that this is not an appropriate project for this site, then I don't know what is, staff. The proposal is extremely problematic, and in the words of our famous President Ronald Reagan, here you go again. We went through this approximately 20 years ago with these same kinds of concerns that have not been addressed by this proposal, and if it does anything, it completely destroys the character of our community. It is not consistent with any buildings within a half a mile of my community. It does not provide for the current traffic. I wish you tried to cross from Darrell onto Church Street from 8 o'clock in the morning and about 3:30. I've sat at that stop sign sometimes as much as 15 minutes trying to get access to Church Street. This is not going to make that better. The setbacks is a completely, I do not want my neighborhood looking like those buildings on Chicago Avenue and South Boulevard, where they come right to the curb. It's not good for students on bicycles trying to get back and forth to the high school or going to Dewey School. And secondly, we got no notification of this. And I know with form-based zoning, you do not have the same requirements you had when I first made opposition to this program, that everyone within 1,000 feet would get notification of this project and a chance to come in. I'm very upset about this, and I hope that you recognize that my community deserves better than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. I will just say, staff brings proposals to us that are submitted. They don't make any decisions. That's what we're here for. The next speaker I have is Tina Payden.
Hi, good evening. Happy New Year. I don't know when you stopped saying it, but.
I think we're still within, I think the first 2 weeks you can do it.
Now, is this a question and answer also for the?
If you have questions that you'd like to put to the developer, yes, you may ask them at this time. But what we'll do is we'll ask him to respond separately instead of having a discussion with you.
Okay. So I would like to know, and I asked this, they had a community meeting last Thursday at the church, and I wanted to know if there was official paperwork on record that the site has been cleaned. That's been the big debate. This was a gas station site, and everybody's doing fancy footwork about official paperwork that this site has been cleaned. The community should be able to know this. Also, the church is asking for the property in red on that the city owns to be granted to them as part of the project. And I wanted to know how much I asked at the meeting, how much was the property worth at this time that the city owns? And is there appraisal, and has that been fancy footwork on this too? Because they said they're not asking for anything, but that's a big ask. And with that, will the church own all of the land? Or will the church just own the land that the church is being built on? That makes a difference because the church is tax exempt. So I gathered from the meeting that the church and HODC did 2 separate applications because of this matter of being the church exempt. And I didn't get a clear understanding. The church said that they were going to build on their own, and HODC is on their own, but it's all on the same property. Will they have different PIN numbers? Or is it one PIN number? How does that work? And will HODC be building the church? Is the notice for the overlay 500 feet or 1,000 feet? So there's 46 parking spaces, I believe, for the 44 units. Where will the people park that are going to church? Parking is very scarce in this area. How will that work? What are the size of the apartments? 1, 2, and 3 bedroom. What is the size? I also asked about minority hiring for the building. Didn't get an answer from Alderman Burns, even though he sits on the MWEBE committee. And so I would like to know and have some kind of commitment for minority hiring and Evanston hiring. I also would like probably for Ms. Flax to discuss the rules and regulations of promising Evanston residents that they will get first choice. This is a farce, and we know there's a central list. If you ask for money, the developer said he has $18 million, and he will be asking the city for $4 million of TIF money. Then you have to go with a central waiting list. So I would like Ms. Flax to explain the rules of the waiting list and how the likelihood of preference to Evanston residents living in this apartment building is slim to none. Should I make my comments later, or?
If you have some brief comments, yes, please, go ahead.
I believe that this building is being shoved down our throats. We've only had 1 Zoom meeting and 2 community meetings. This land from the city of Evanston was supposed to be discussed with the citizens. Instead, it was discussed with the church and the developer and the alderman, and then they said, this is for you. This is not for us. Me and several other people have spent 20 years trying to work with the West Evanston plan. And we had other visions for the property many years ago, and we were shot down. And we believe, several of us, many of us, that this is inappropriate for this site, and we need more conversation with this project. And we should have the opportunity for city-owned land for the citizens to weigh in instead of giving a gift to someone, a very expensive gift that should be for the people in the community. I beg that you delay this or stop this and listen to us for once. We're always being overheard on anything. And this project needs to be stopped today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Payton. The next speaker I have is Priscilla Giles. Ms. Giles?
Thank you. I object to the size of this building that is not compatible to the other buildings in the area. The development is not only affecting this block, but the whole city, as it is said to house underserved residents in Evanston who will come from all over the city. It was originally said to provide a church, low-income housing, a training center with small income producing businesses in a two or story edifice. The city of Evanston persistently talks about housing for the underserved and underemployed, and this does not seem to be doing that. I didn't have a chance, and I know you said that I should not speak on any other, but nothing was said when you talked about the King Home. And this was also a place where people who are underemployed and low income could have a place to live. Both of these are some edifices that should be serving the whole city of Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giles. Nambi Chambers?
Hello.
Hello.
I've been living in Evanston for the past 12 years, within the 1800 block of Darrow, and I oppose the building of I oppose to whatever they're going to build with this building. Reason being, I'm concerned about the traffic. Living on the block, I mean, I'm a block away from where it is. It's going to be very hard for parking and all that stuff. I'm concerned about, as to what Carl Sutton said, the kids in the area, the crossing, the traffic, all that stuff. That's my concern. The height of the building, it's too high. There's nothing in the area that's like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will probably not pronounce this correctly. Is it Ziamara Chambers?
I oppose this project. A couple things. The building doesn't match anything in our area. You guys only have parking for 46. You got 46 parking and 44 units. What happens when people come and visit them? Where are they gonna park? Parking is already tight. When there's street cleaning, there's no parking on the block. When there is no cleaning, no parking on the block, because you could only park on one side. You can't park on the other side. The storefront is an issue because the city has had a problem with standstill traffic in front of the stores and the salons on Dodge and Church. So that's going to happen over there as well. Let's see. I think that's it that I could think of.
Thank you, Ms. Chambers. The last person I have signed up is Katie Nowaki.
Good evening. My name is Katie Naraki, and these comments to the Land Use Commission members are a summary of the written comments submitted on behalf of Crosby Theodore, LLC, the owner of 1817 Church Street, and occupants of this property in advance of this commission hearing. We ask that the Land Use Commission grant a continuance of 3 months in order for us to discuss with the Housing Opportunity Development Corporation alternatives to major variations requested by the applicant and present testimony that takes into account the materials submitted by the applicant. We understand that HODC made documents regarding this major development publicly available approximately 1 week ago, and thus we request more time to consider these documents. As a threshold matter, we express our sincere support for the spirit of the proposed redevelopment, given its capacity to provide the affordable housing for Evanston residents. This is an important goal of the City of Evanston and the 5th Ward, and we have no objections to this goal. However, we also express our concerns that the approach of the redevelopment will adversely impact the neighborhood and our historic landmark should the Land Use Commission grant the major variations requested by this applicant. Additionally, we note to the members that 1817 Church Street is a designated historic landmark. The building was constructed in 1927 and contains approximately 4,100 square feet of space. It has been used for both commercial and residential purposes. Its French Second Empire architectural styling contributed to its designation as a local landmark in 1996. In summary, our concerns are as follows. First, the major variations to the height, setback, and architectural requirements in the zoning code will have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, and property value of the adjoining property, 1817 Church Street, to the concerns of water drainage and storm water management, disruption of a historical landmark, and the loss of environmental resources. Second, the major variations to existing height, setback, and architectural requirements in the zoning code do not align with the intent of the zoning code, which include limiting the height and bulk of buildings erected to prevent overcrowding and of land, establishing, regulating, and limiting setback lines along streets and property lines, and encouraging the preservation and enhancement of natural resources. Third, OHDC maintains that the existence of vacant lots on a development of a developed block, qualifies as a peculiar characteristic. We agree that such vacant lots on a developed lot should be used for the benefit of the public, including for affordable housing. However, the existence of such vacant lots is not a peculiar or special characteristic warranting a major variation. For we have not seen evidence that the proposed development presents the least deviation from Evanston's zoning code. Acceptance of all major variations is a substantial deviation from the existing requirements under the code. Instead, a proposed development that requests some but not all of the 7 major variations may be more in line with this least deviation standard. And finally, the fifth, the HODC asserts that one of the public benefits provided by the proposed redevelopment is affordable housing for low-income households. HODC does not explain why such a benefit requires a major variation and cannot be accomplished without the 7 major variations requested. For the above reasons, we ask the Land Use Commission to grant a continuance of 3 months to allow us to first allow the parties to engage in a dialogue about alternatives to the major variations that would mitigate the adverse impact on 1817 Church Street property and surrounding community. And second, present testimony that takes into account the materials submitted by the Housing Opportunity Development Corporation that they sent in last week. Thank you for considering our comments.
Do you have that written that I can have a copy of it? Because when we grant a continuance, we usually grant it for specific purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is it,
Can we
that-
email it to you? Is that okay?
yeah.
Great. We will send it to you over email.
Okay, it's the one we received literally like 15 minutes before tonight's meeting. Okay.
Yes.
I was just told that over here. I hadn't had a chance to look at that one in its entirety yet, so I didn't realize that was the full text you were reading. Okay, so I don't need a copy of it. I have a copy of it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Is there anybody who wished to speak that I did not call on, that did not have their name on the list? Wait until you get to the microphone, please, so they can hear you and record you.
Sure. Hi, Vanessa Johnson McCoy. I didn't plan to, but since there was so many other comments on the con side, I'll give a comment on the pro side. So I'm a local real estate broker with Coldwell Banker here in Evanston, and affordable housing is definitely needed. And I was on the other side for a development across the street from my house on Pittner and Dempster a couple of years ago, well before COVID, so that must have been about 4 years ago. And that was 16 units. And I was saying some of the same things that others are saying. This is too big. This is not what we have in our, along our blocks, because it's 3 stories and it's mostly single family and townhomes right there on Dempster and Pittner. But I will say now that, it hasn't been all the concerns that we had about parking and the water drainage, and it hasn't been an issue. I mean, I have seen quite a few police officers and fire and all that, but it hasn't impacted us living there. So if that helps comfort the local residents at all, we had these same concerns for a building across. So affordable housing is totally needed, and I love the church, and we fellowship with their church, and so this would allow them to do even more for the community if they had more space. And so I just think on the other side, I just wanted to stand in support of exploring and hopefully them being able to progress forward with their plans. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCoy. I saw 2 other hands go up. The gentleman over here and in the Northwestern shirt.
Hi, my name is Sydney Reed, and I do support this development, and I do have a few concerns, such as some questions Tina brought up about Ms. Payton brought up about the traffic and things like that. But I'm all for having more middle income and low income housings for the people is badly needed in the city of Evanston. The variance, I understand. If you look on Chicago Avenue, there were a lot of variance done up there. And also, the school is 4 stories. And with the tower makes it 5. So I like change, and it will go back on the tax roll, and I don't think it's on the tax roll now that I know of, and those things are important. So I ask you to consider, and then maybe the team, Reverend Williams and Mr. Koenig, can answer some of the questions about the drainage and the parking, because parking is a problem, but you got the lot across the street. So, and I don't know if the church is building the underground parking or not. I didn't hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Keith Banks. I am an affordable housing developer and advocate. I'm the Executive Director for the Reba Place Development Corporation. I've lived in Evanston for over 28 years in the 2nd Ward. However, I've been a leader in the faith-based community for over 20 years. I would just like to say that, the time is now to approve a development like this. It's a great opportunity. I was part of a community development corporation 15 years ago that had the vision for what's HODC is doing now, which they tried to do 15 years ago, and the city wasn't ready for it. So the demand is high. I mean, there's over 7,000 units, affordable housing units needed now. And so to have 44 units, it makes a small dent, but it will make a big impact for low-income families that are in desperate need of affordable housing that are getting forced out. They have to move far north suburbs, far west suburbs, far south suburbs in order to find decent, safe, affordable housing. 5 stories is not too tall because based on the economic scales, you can't build a smaller unit and afford to be able to do it. And if we're giving for-profit developers all kind of bonus incentives to go up higher so that they can accommodate for affordable housing, why can't we give 5 stories to an affordable housing developer where it's going to be all affordable housing? So it makes perfect sense. The collaborative that I was a part of was a very diverse collaborative, the Evanston Community Development Corporation, which was made up of former alderpersons Dolores Holmes, 5th Ward, former alderpersons Lionel Baptiste, former police chief Bill Logan, and many, many other community leaders that all galvanized together that wanted to address the redlining issues on Church and Dodge. You know, those properties have been underdeveloped, and to have a vacant lot that's been there for over 30 years is really unacceptable. So it's really time. The time is now. It's needed. It's necessary. It's the right thing to do. So let's make this happen. I mean, it's a great project. It's going to allow the church to expand, allow new economic development, which is going to provide job training, jobs for the community. So it's going to be a good recipe to cure a lot of the ills, like I say, the total underdevelopment of that whole strip on Church Street from Darrow all the way to, I think it's Brown Avenue. You know, so this will be a great opportunity to do that. I would encourage the commissioners to support this. I support it. It's a great project. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. I want to get to the people who have not spoken yet.
This was not directed towards a project. I'm just asking that for future meetings, with the pandemic increasing again with COVID, I ask that this meeting be hybrid. I speak frequently about having hybrid meetings, so I'm immune compromised, and as well as seniors and other people that can't make it to the meeting, I ask that I've been advocating that all meetings go hybrid. Thank you.
Thank you. That's unfortunately not a decision I get to make. That's kind of right. So it's on the record, and I will raise that with staff as necessary.
Hi, good evening. My name's Erin Jackson. The primary tenant at 1817 Church is Jackson LLP Healthcare Lawyers. So I wanted to just introduce myself and speak to some of what Ms. Naraki spoke to on the building's behalf, and say that the water issues for our particular property, which is a historic building and thus has some limitations with modifications we can make to it. We have owned the building for about a year and a half, and we have experienced significant water issues already. The only ADA access to our building that is the way that it was redeveloped before we bought it is via a ramp that slants downward towards our back door, and less than a year ago, we had to replace all the hardwood floors on our first floor. We already have water issues. We've done other water remediation. So it really is a significant issue where we do have water coming in already that we're working at our own expense, of course, to try to mitigate, but it's something that is a pre-existing issue for us. We are a local small business. We live here in Evanston. We are thrilled and humbled to be part of the local community, and we very much support the spirit of affordable housing in the area, and we very much embrace that. We also very much, as a small business, we offer incentives to our employees to also relocate to Evanston. We try to hire people who are walking distance from the office, so it really is something that is important to us, that people be able to afford to live nearby, and something we value. But I just wanted to sort of introduce myself and say that we're proud owners of the historic building, but it has presented some unique challenges that aren't necessarily going to be lightly impacted by a large development, including things like parking for our team. And we just completed a remodeling ourselves in our space and such. So. And I'm happy to answer any questions, as I know Ms. Naraki already requested the continuance, but we'd like to be able to evaluate in greater detail how this might impact us.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Yes.
Gentleman over here.
Good evening. My name is Peter Isaac. And I guess my first question is, if there's going to be a continuance, I'd like to save my comments for the follow-up meeting. So I don't know if that's something you are going to deliberate or decide right now.
We're going to deliberate that as soon as we get the last citizen comment, but if you'd like to hold your comment, if we decide to continue, you can hold your comment. If we decide not to continue, then you can come up and speak at that point.
Thank you.
I think I've got everybody in the room. There were several questions, several issues raised. We do have a request for a continuance that is in the document here that was presented to us just before the meeting. Commissioner Lindwall?
Well, I'd like to suggest that the applicant respond to the questions that Tina Payden raised, I think, before we get to the purpose of the, the discussion of the continuance.
Mr. Koenig, if you'd like to, and I was kind of writing them down, so I don't know if you got all of them, and I think I may have gotten most of them.
I wrote down as many as I could. Can I start with the one of the questions that was raised was the lack of public meetings about this project? Can I start with that one? Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Whatever order you want to take them in.
I removed this from my slide because I didn't think it was necessary, but I want to, the community meetings for this project, the latest iteration, in my mind, started in July of 2019 when Councilmember Ruth Simmons held community meetings specifically regarding this site. There were additional ward discussions in October of 2019 regarding the site, and the city of Evanston, based on those ward discussions in the 5th Ward, issued the RFQ in January of 2020. In June of 2020, the Economic Development Committee met to discuss proposals for the, in response to the RFP, and the Economic Development Committee took a vote and recommended a partnership between HODC and Mount Pisgah Ministry in December of 2020. The City Council then discussed the ordinance in January 2021 and approved the ordinance February 8th in 2021. There was a 5th Ward presentation on this specific proposal in August 25th of 2021, and another one on December 30th, August 2021. On September 24th, I personally walked the neighborhood, all the streets up and down Darrow and Church and Dodge and Lyons, and distributed flyers, every single business, every single home, and knocked on doors and talked with a lot of residents, a lot of neighbors. That was followed up by a community meeting on September 28th, 2022. So based on that long, boring list of dates, we have tried, and the aldermen have tried, and the council members, and to make public outreach, we've tried to announce to the community. There has been opportunity for input. So someone saying there weren't any meetings about this, I'm sure not quite my perception of how that meetings. We've made ourselves as publicly available as possible regarding that. Regarding Ms. Payden's question about environmental clearance, the city actually has a no further remediation letter that was included in the RFP that was issued, and it's also in the packet of information. Pastor Wilson has testified several times, including at the most recent meeting, that he personally saw the tanks being taken out of the ground. So between the tanks being gone and the no further remediation, the environmental cleanup has been cleared per the city's role. There would be additional cleanup required, but that'll be part of the construction project. Question regarding property value. We have obtained appraisal for a portion of the property because it's going to be donated, and estimated the appraised value of about $1 million for the property. Will the church own the entire site? No. As we explained, the church owns, there was the picture we showed earlier where there's the yellow rectangle and the red rectangle. The church will continue to just own the yellow rectangle, but it's going to be slid to the east. HODC will own the red rectangle to the west. And on that property, we will pay, as I mentioned, we will pay property taxes. The two projects, so we will combine all the parcels. There are currently 5. They will be combined and re-subdivided to 2. One owned by the church, one owned by HODC. And those will have different pins. HODC will not be involved in building the church. The church will be responsible for the development, building the church. The two projects are completely separate and developed separately. I don't know what the notice requirements are. Somebody else can help with that. The church itself has a question about the church parking. Pastor Wilson, if you want to talk about church parking a little bit, that'd be helpful.
Currently, the church plan has church parking spaces. I think it's about 7 church spaces right in the rear of the church. And I've already asked and received permission to use the Evanston Township High School southeast parking lot for Sundays if we have to. And for any variations, because usually that's where the problem comes in with churches, not just Mount Pisgah, but all churches, and those variations are funerals and weddings. The church just directly north of us is Bethel AME Church, and I'm reaching the pastor to ask if those situations happen, if they would allow us to use those parking lots on Saturdays or any other days that they are not using them. Also, the church just north of there, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who meets on Saturdays, I've approached the pastor there, and I'm just waiting for him to get back to me. So those are additional parking spaces that we would be able to use in case we need them.
Thank you.
Any other questions about parking?
So the staff member Flax was reminding me about the value of the donation. Part of the reason that part of the value in the donation of the property is that we're able to generate state donation tax credits from that donation, and that actually creates additional financing to put into the development. So there's a real benefit to having that financing that helps overall be able to build the overall development. Regarding the wait list and preferences. We've been very clear and discussed this at public meetings about the idea of preferences. Federal fair housing law doesn't allow it. We are asking specifically to allow that. We'll comply with what the law says. We'll comply with what the state agencies say. It's not a ruse. We are honestly asking, but we have to comply with the law, and so we're requesting that preferences be allowed. Our experience is that the people who live in our buildings are people who tend to live around the properties. There's a concentric reach for folks who are interested in the properties. People who live in town will be the first ones to find out about it. They'll be the ones who primarily on the wait list and who are interested in primarily in living there. So that's been our historic experience with people living in the properties that we meet. Any other questions that I may have skipped?
One was the size of the apartments.
Do you know exactly?
So I think there were 1, 2, and 3 bedroom, if I'm remembering correctly.
This requires going to the glasses. 1 bedroom units, about 670, between 640 and 670. 2 bedrooms from 782 to 908, and 3 bedrooms from 1,053 to 1,150.
Okay. And then there was a question about hiring minority, complying with the city's minority hiring program.
Yes, absolutely would comply with the city's hiring program. And I think that Councilmember Burns had addressed that issue and the need to make sure we enforce it and follow that rule.
Okay. Are there other questions from commissioners for Mr. Koenig? I know.
What is the mix of the 1, 2, 3 bedrooms? How many of each type, do you know?
Sure. It is 13 one-bedrooms, 22 bedrooms, and 11 three-bedrooms. 13, 20, and 11.
Commissioner Halleck?
Yeah, I don't know if this is appropriate to ask, but you said that the church project and the housing project are 2 separate projects. That means they're financed totally separately, and there's no one helps the other in that way.
Correct.
Did you consider, people have spoken about, and we certainly agree that affordable housing is needed in Evanston, but is the church, does the church need to be part of this project, is my question, or can you lower the height bulk by buying the property to the east, or reducing the program for the church and lowering the height of the housing?
I mean, the church is an integral part of the neighborhood. It's an integral part of the project and the proposal to change it. I mean, you're right. It's hard to answer that. Are you asking, do I want to kick the church out and just take over the entire lot? No. I mean, the church is an important piece of this. But yeah, if we had more land, we could do a different development, but having the church there is really important to the neighborhood.
No, I understand that, and the petitioner for the time extension is asking for more discussions, and more discussions to me would mean, hey, how about considering some other options here that may be radical to you, but they may allow you to pursue this project.
Yeah, I mean, we've absolutely been open to suggestions for the past many years. The last year actively reaching out, last 2 years actively reaching out for suggestions. This is the first that we've heard from other people who say they can't provide input. We've done what we feel we could between the council member and public meetings and going door to door. I'm always happy to have the conversation, but to say there weren't meetings, there weren't opportunities.
No, I think some people just wake up at the last minute.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Koenig at this particular moment? If not,
Could we get a response for the question about the notice that was sent?
oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to move on to that one. but I
Okay.
didn't know if there was any more for him.
Mail notice was sent within a radius of 1,000 feet.
Okay.
500, it's 500 feet because these are variations on a planned development. So my correction, 500 feet.
500 feet, okay. So with that, we have the pending request for a continuance for the discussion, or for the purpose of having discussion on alternatives and presenting testimony. There's been a request for a 3-month continuance. I don't know that we've ever granted a 3-month continuance for a project like this. That to me seems a little long. Yeah, yes, Pastor.
I'd just like to say that we've been in our building since 1987. And tonight was the first time that I've seen our neighbor. And we had a meeting at the corner, which at the building called Buku. We had 2 meetings there, and then we had 2 at the church, and I've never seen them there. So if they want to have more continuance because they didn't get a chance to have any input, it doesn't seem that's fair to say that. That's all I want to say.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Westerberg?
One question I have is, when were the actual plans put on the website? That would have been a week ago, correct, staff? Or Friday of last week, is that correct?
The packet was posted on Friday.
Right.
The public notices were mailed out mid-December. So they're.
No, I understand. What I'm asking is, has this particular version of the plans, has that been shown to the community before this, for this hearing? Do you know?
The packet itself was posted on Friday.
Right.
And so the application would have been posted on the city's webpage.
All right, so Mr. Koenig, maybe I can ask you, in your previous meetings, did you show an earlier version of these plans, or when were these plans themselves finalized so people could see the elevations and things like that?
Right, we've provided the elevations and this general description of this project for the past year and a half, at least 18 months. We put together large storyboards that were put out in public in areas out at Fleetwood Jourdain, out at the Lighthouse, so that if people came in, they're sort of just publicly out there and available, large size poster boards, people could see those. But other than the fine detailing, these particular plans have been out in public at all those public meetings for at least the last year and a half.
And as we saw them tonight, let's say, or as we've seen them?
It's been about the 5 stories. It's been this sort of general mix of units. It's been the church on the corner and this in the middle. We've added things that we added over time. We added the balconies, the projecting balconies out on the front. We added the rooftop deck. So the rooftop deck and the balconies wasn't on the plans from years ago. I think there were planters on the original plan a year ago. So those sort of things, those enhancements have continued to add value based on the conversation and the comments that we've gotten from people.
Okay.
Is that for the apartment, or is that for the church, or are those 2 separate sets of plans?
They both come along together. We've been doing this hand in hand throughout
Okay.
the entire time, and so if you look at the side of the elevations that we've had, they both always had those.
Yeah, 'cause-
The city has had their plans, I mean, they had a version of their plans on their website prior to 2022 when the city did the RFQ.
Yeah, because I was noticing in the traffic study, for example, it describes a two-story church rather than the three-story church that is in the application. Not that it has a lot necessarily to do with parking, or traffic, but there are some differences.
Yeah, we've definitely had
Just trying to-
enhancements and added value over time and tried to do things that would make it, and I think it qualifies as 3 because of the large size of the inside of the church building. So it's sort of set up to be 2, but ends up being measured as 3. So that was the understanding. It wasn't that it was a big change, it's how it's defined.
Understood. I'm just trying to understand if giving people a little more time would help them understand the plans, which aren't necessarily all that clear to someone who may not be used to looking at architectural plans. Setbacks, things like that are sometimes a little hard to figure out. So, thank you.
If I may, Erin Jackson.
Very quickly, please.
Yes. I did want to say a member of our firm was at the most recent meeting that the pastor held at his church. We attend monthly local business association meetings, and we've also kept a very close eye on the city's website focused on this development, and I think that was part of potentially confusion about what news was about the development, because there are not recent updates. I think the most recent update is well over a year old. It may be from 2021. So we had been refreshing and watching that.
right.
And that's part of why we were on.
All right, thank you. What are commissioners' thoughts on the granting of a continuance? I would in no way grant a 3-month continuance. I think that is excessive for a request for materials that have been, maybe not in their final iteration, but have been out in the public, discussions have been occurring. Commissioner Halleck?
Yeah, I think this is a big, important project, very significant project, and also it's a significant ask. So I think it's appropriate to, whatever the arguments are back and forth, I just think because of its significance, it's appropriate to grant a continuance, not 3 months, maybe a month, 6 weeks, something in that order.
I'm going to go to staff real briefly on this because we have lots and lots and lots of big projects coming down. So I kind of want to get an idea as to what our schedule looks like. If staff can project that far out, maybe something in the 1-month range. Because we do have to continue to a date specific, so.
The February 8th meeting would work.
So that is basically 1 month, almost a month. And what's the meeting after that look like? I'm getting a shaking no heads from that. So my inclination would be to continue this until our February 8th meeting, that allows almost 4 weeks for discussion between the developer, the church, and some of the neighbors. I will also just remind everyone that when we grant a continuance, no additional notifications are mailed out. Because my stating this and we approving it to a certain date is the public notice. So no one will get new postcards on this. So I would like to clarify that because people come back and say, well, it was continued and I didn't get a postcard. You will not get a postcard mailed to you. How does everyone feel about continuation until February 8th?
I'm in favor.
All right. Does someone want to make a motion as such? And we would be continuing both of these cases, so please include both of them into the request for continuance.
Okay. I move that we continue the 1801 to 1805 Church Street special use and major variations, case 22ZMJV-0089, and 1811 to 15 Church Street major variations, case number 22ZMJV-0092, to the February 8th Land Use Commission meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Lindwald, and I heard Westerberg with the second. Is there any further discussion? Anything from staff that you want to throw in before we?
So if you could please just clarify a little more specifically what your expectations are of the applicant related to, working with the neighborhood? Is there anything
I would like
specific you
to
can
see,
offer?
I mean, my personal, and I'll speak personally, and then everyone else can sort of chime in. I mean, I think there needs to be a public meeting of some sort, and I see you shaking, I see your deflation going on there, but I think that's what we need at this particular moment in order to get some of these questions answered. I don't know that, I think there are things that we need question-wise, but I think our stuff is all pretty straightforward. I think there needs to be a discussion between the developer, the church, and the neighborhood, and then they need to come to us with some more agreement, so at least everybody's on the same page. Because what I'm hearing is people are not on the same page, and I'm not faulting anyone for that. I know quite often we get people who show up because people aren't keeping track of what's going on. They think they are, but sometimes things just fall through the cracks. I get about 20 emails a week from the city of Evanston, I think. So I would just like to see some discussion occur between them. This is not a typical continuance in the way that we grant them where it's on a specific issue, but I don't think there's one specific issue that's the sticking point here. I think it's kind of the overall getting everybody on the same page.
I think in part it has to do, in my mind, I think that the issues related to stormwater detention and drainage, and particularly the lot coverage for the apartment, the residential portion of this, and particularly the, building 100% of the, covering almost 100% of the lot, is something that I think should be discussed with the neighbors. And, I will be asking questions about that when this does come back.
Can I just make a comment on that? And this is not I have experience in Chicago on this issue, and Chicago has 100% lot coverage a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And you provide detention, you provide a lot of detention, and so it's released in a slow rate into the sewer system, and that works. So I'm just saying, I don't see that as an issue. I think it can be solved technically.
It probably can be solved, but I think that is in particular a particular concern of the neighborhood. And I think, functioning of that alley is again, important. So those are things that I'd like to see discussed with the neighbors. I don't know that they'll necessarily be resolved, but I'd like to see that addressed.
Does that help direct? All right. I know it's difficult, but this is a major project in this neighborhood. And I have the feeling that there are some gaps in communication. And again, I'm not faulting anyone for that, be it from the city, neighbors, developer, the church, anybody. But what I'm saying is I'd like everybody to at least get together one more time and talk so that when we come back, we're all talking from the same page at least. So there is a motion by Commissioner Lindwald, seconded by Commissioner Westerberg. Do you want to take a roll on this?
Sure. Commissioner Aravallo?
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Lindwall?
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
Yes, so by a vote of 5-0, the matter will be continued until our February 8th meeting. And again, I will reiterate to everyone, there will not be another postcard coming out. So do put that on your calendars now, so that if you want to show up again, that's when you will be here. I would ask that those of you who have spoken tonight, if you want to speak again, I will allow it at that meeting, which we typically do not do, but I will ask you to be succinct in your conversations. I do not want to kind of rehash ground we've covered tonight already. So with that, this matter is continued until our February 8th meeting. Those are the items that we do have on the agenda this evening in terms of cases. I will now go back to the items which are some of our housekeeping things, which are election of commission officers, zoning committee members, plan committee members, and our plan steering committee chair. I would like to hold off on the placing of committees until we have a more constituted board, since we only have 5 of the 9 present tonight. But we can go ahead and elect officers this evening. So with that, the first item is the election of a land use commission chair.
I nominate Matt Rogers.
Second.
It's been moved by Halleck, seconded by Lindwall. I would accept the nomination. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. By a vote of 5-0, I will be returning as the commission chair. We have a vice chair also. Commissioner Puctel has served as our vice chair the past year. He has offered to do it again, I believe, was the communication that I received. So I would put him into nomination.
I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded for Commissioner Puctel to serve another year as vice chair. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So with a vote of 5-0, we will have Commissioner Puctel serve as vice chair. We will be skipping the placement of committee members at this particular moment and going to the election of a comprehensive plan steering committee chair. I believe that Commissioner Lindwall has served in this capacity and hasn't really gotten to do much of anything.
No, and I'd love to.
We've not been there. So I would put into nomination Commissioner Lindwall to be the steering committee chair for the comprehensive plan.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
By a vote of 5-0, Commissioner Lindwall will return as being the comprehensive plan steering committee chair.
Maybe I'll get to do something.
We will now move on to communication.
Oh, no,
the
meeting
calendar.
schedule.
Oh, sorry, forgot I'd move that as well. The adoption of the meeting schedule, there is a calendar placed before us. We have to sort of agree on what our annual meeting schedule will be. And so these are the dates that I'm assuming staff has checked these against all holidays for major religions of all types. I know sometimes October, September, we run into Jewish holidays, but I'm guessing that they've checked on those. I did not. So the calendar that's been placed before us, is there a motion to adopt it?
I'll move to adopt.
Moved by Westerberg.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Second by Lindwall. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So by a vote of 5-0, our calendar is approved for this year. Now we move on to communication. Is there anything staff would like to share with us?
Ready. So I assume the question is, where are we at with the comprehensive plan update? Is that a fair question to
Sure.
respond to? So recently, staff has come together, pulled together some key elements that we intend to recommend and kind of bring around to various boards, commissions, committees to review ahead of finalizing, making sure that we're covering all of our bases. So more to come on that. We're working on the details of that coordination with the various committees that have purview over the comprehensive plan. In addition, we've met with the mayor to get some feedback on the initial draft as well. So he is supportive of kind of the approach moving forward. So more to come.
Is there a target for completing all that?
I'm not prepared yet to put a date on it, just given where we're at workload-wise. But I do know it is the top priority of our department, and there is a lot of focus and emphasis on wanting to get this off the ground. So I would say probably in the next couple months, we'll have some more communications on it. And then, hopefully our goal is to hit the streets with that RFP,
Well, the RFP hasn't been sent out yet.
Correct, yes, we're still working on the details of that. So that's our communication at this time.
I will remind everyone that we've had, at least I've gotten billions of little things I've had to do ethics-wise and financial disclosure-wise and all of that sort of stuff. So make sure that you are all current on that.
I have a question on that. There, in your email, there was another form that I didn't get, and you said it was going to be sent by someone else, and I can't even remember who or what. But it was not the Open Meetings Act. It was something else.
So there's the Open Meetings Act, financial disclosure, ethics.
That just came this week. It came from Saul, the city clerk's office.
I didn't.
Yeah, Sol in city clerk's office, he has sent a few things separately, is my understanding. I don't think I've been copied necessarily on those.
You might get a reminder, because I didn't fill it out today.
I didn't get it.
Staff will touch base with the clerk's office and make sure that they are communicating with everyone, so.
Unless it went to, junk, but.
Commissioner Westerberg, you had your light on. Was that?
Yes, I had a question for staff. The Masonic Temple project that we voted on to recommend did go to City Council. And I understand that one of our recommendations, which was to include, I think, 5 more parking spaces for the first 2 years, was something you circled around and said, we do not recommend this to the City Council. I can understand there are different points of view on that. My only question is, when you change or alter a recommendation from this group, do you or are you expected to communicate that to us before the City Council meeting? Do you know what the rules or regulations are on that? I'd be curious to know. It would be helpful to know that that change is being made before it goes to the council.
My understanding is that hasn't been how staff has approached it in past practice, but your suggestion is noted, and we can, work internally to figure out the best path for that communication moving forward. In our recommendation to the City Council, we did note the Planning Commission's recommendation. We also provided additional justification for why staff had a differing perspective, or the department did, on the request before the City Council. And the City Council did discuss it at the Planning and Development Committee in terms of the process and practice of changing the recommendation from the Land Use Commission. So during that discussion, Corporation Council did note that it was noted in the ordinance in terms of the recommendation and staff's suggestion for something different. And it was also communicated in the memos that went to Planning and Development Committee and the City Council as well. So your
Understood,
suggestion is
and
noted.
I read that, and it was good that you detailed out the way you did. I think it's just a courtesy. It would be nice to know that.
Absolutely appreciate the feedback.
The last thing that I would do before we move to adjournment is I will make a referral to staff that we look at our definition of an apartment hotel and make adjustments as necessary based on the discussion that you heard from us this evening, so that we don't have these gray areas. And it can be included in our next omnibus, because I doubt if we're going to get a slew of apartment hotels in the next few months. But just to help clarify, what is that exactly?
Appreciate that. We'll put it on our list.
I think the tax issue is a real driver for this.
So,
more
yeah.
than anything.
Anything else to bring before the board? Hearing nothing. There is no public here to comment. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We do stand adjourned until our next meeting, which will be on the 24th of this month. 25th, I'm sorry. Thank you, everyone.